So there's a general policy for historical preservation in China, not to excavate imperial tomb in general. So that is a general guidance. And the idea was to protect those important underground historical heritage for future generation when the preservation technology ideally would be good enough to protect everything intact during the excavation, because there had been some really bad experience in archaeological excavation during the excavation of the a Han Dynasty tomb called the Ma Wangdui, and archaeologists discovered those silk ropes accompanying the deceased in the tomb. They were, when they were first unearthed, they were, bright, fresh, very colorful. But then quickly, when they were exposed to air, they quickly turned black, and only after, a few minutes, and then quickly powderized. So there were that kind of a experience. Sometimes materials that had been buried underground for thousands of years, and a new kind of environment was created, and preserving them, if they still exist today, then they probably will continue to exist for another 1,000 years or more, if they were left intact underground. So, but once they are exposed to modern air, they would be, changed very quickly. Those chemical reactions take place very quickly to destroy whatever is exposed to air. So that's the general kind of policy, and as a result, presumably those imperial tombs should contain more important artifacts, and having greater scale and better treasures. So in general, they were not excavated deliberately, unless they were already robbed, or someone had already kind of broke into it or start stealing things from the tomb. Then there would be when the archaeologists knew they were already exposed to having some kind of contact, then they might be opened and excavated. So some imperial tomb from the Ming and the Qing dynasty were excavated because of that reason. And a lot of these tombs were also, even those local tombs were not deliberately opened. Very often, they might also be broken into, or a architectural construction, discover those tombs unintentionally and open them unintentionally. So a lot of those tombs were kind of discovered that way, not necessarily by deliberate archaeological effort, but as a side effect of kind of new urbanization. Anyway, for Han Dynasty tombs, none of those imperial tombs are opened yet, but there are kind of local level tombs. So here I'm showing you two pictures showing the interior of Han Dynasty tomb. So they often have those kind of a corbelled vault, and those corbelled vault are created by slanting two large kind of sometimes stone slabs, but more often those large bricks, those hollow inside bricks, like these ones, and they meet at the top with another kind of flat horizontal bricks and create that kind of triangular space that looks very similar to those timber structure from the period that are depicted in those tombs model and wall painting. The structure underneath also suggests a timber construction. So we have those lintels and columns supporting a triangular space, suggesting a gabled roof. If this is a interior for a above ground house. And those bricks and stones in the tomb from Han Dynasty bear elaborate carvings, inscriptions, and paintings. So sometimes they were painted, but sometimes they were carved. So in this case, there were paintings featuring complicated patterns depicting fantastic animal figures, as well as sometimes human figures on the lintel as well. But in this case, we have those dragon-like creature depicted, and inscriptions on the wall and in the ceiling eulogize the achievement of the deceased. So in this case, it was a official. So, and Eastern Han Dynasty, so kind of a similar that mausoleum tradition continued. For example, this is the tomb for the founding emperor, the founder of the Eastern Han Empire, Emperor Guangwu. And Eastern Han, the capital is in the city of Luoyang. So this one is in the area close to Luoyang, in the Mengjin County. So the above ground structure is still a truncated pyramid. You can see it's still a truncated pyramid behind this woods. And again, we don't know anything about anything else of that tomb, because underground chambers were not opened yet. But again, we do have quite a few Eastern Han Dynasty local tombs opened. Well, the Western Han underground tomb were mostly, painted images. Those decorations are mostly painted, and the inscriptions were carved. The Eastern Han tomb, at least from those local tombs whose data are available, the underground chambers were more decorated with relief carving instead of those kind of a colorful painting. This is one from Shandong province. It's from the city of Yinan, and the interior shows a kind of masonry structure using stone, but mimicking timber construction. For example, the columns bear kind of a big brackets that remind us the future dougong, that with arm and blocks, and some of those arms and blocks were carved to resemble wings, and carved with images of animal figure, floral figure, and sometimes mythical humanoid as well. The underground chamber is symmetrical, so there's a central passage, and then a series of side rooms, and the ceilings were also created into a kind of a vault shape, but using those stone slabs, large pieces of stone slabs, kind of combined in the fashion like large scale wood timber logs. This is another tomb from Eastern Han, near the city of Luoyang, capital city of Luoyang. And this one used bricks and in combination with stones. So here we have a very kind of interesting arch, a true arch. We know that traditional Chinese architecture is mostly post and lintel structure using wood as the primary material. But that is probably a more symbolic choice for the material. In fact, the construction of arch and vault is quite advanced in historical China, but they were mostly used for the construction of bridges. And we have seen some bridges from the Sui and the Tang dynasty that were constructed using masonry arch. Another realm for the arch and vault construction is underground tombs. So, in the Western Han Dynasty, there were corbelled arches, and in the Eastern Han Dynasty, we have these true arches. So these are, true arch using bricks. But under the arch, there is also a brick. So here we have a large scale brick filling in that space. If not, bearing load, because the arch is a self-sustaining structure, and there's no need to have additional support underneath. So it's probably mostly for the just consolidating the structure The arch is pretty flat, so filling that space is helpful for the structure. And at the same time, it provides a surface for decoration. So in this case, we have those images carved into that brick, and featuring fantastic animal. In fact, it's a dragon and a phoenix. So we have these two fantastic animal. On one side, it's a dragon. On the other side, a phoenix, symbolic animal, because these are also representing different direction. And underneath, we have a column, and some plant motif were carved into it. Kind of giving a feeling of life in the cold and dark underground space. Seemingly, some kind of plant is growing, sprouting, and the column also bear a capital that is kind of similar to some of the architecture in other regions, other areas of the world. And which would, after the Han Dynasty, Han Dynasty is the earliest stage for the introduction of Buddhism. And together with the introduction of Buddhism, some, architectural motif from Central Asia that were influenced by European architecture were also imported to China, and that include the columns and capital. So this is from the Eastern Han period, and which is the very beginning of Buddhist introduction. And this kind of capital-like motif. It is kind of rudimentary, so not specific enough to tell exactly the connection it has, but it is a new kind of phenomena that we have this stone carving that suggests some kind of capital on top of a column. It is also, from these those tombs, not only decorative images were discovered, but also architectural images. For example, this is a wall painting from a Eastern Han Dynasty tomb that depict a large compound, and kind of providing a painted image, painted home for the deceased to enjoy. And that compound shows the architecture of the Han Dynasty with courtyards and a watchtower, and that is quite something. We didn't have that images so specific for a Han Dynasty mansion like that. There were house models discovered from Eastern Han Dynasty tombs, shows combination of courtyards with watchtowers, but those sculpted from clay, and usually the scale are not that specific. The brackets were super big, but here, these painted images somehow captured the scale in a more realistic sense. So you have a better idea about the scale of these towers. And it also suggests the material, the painting captured the material of the masonry tower in combination with a timber pavilion raised on top and cantilevered from the masonry tower, rising above the roofs. So something like that allow us to have a more realistic imagination about Han Dynasty urbanism and architectural detail as well. So these tombs preserved a lot of architectural information. So in addition to the value of tomb themselves, they also had a great value for historical sources about architecture of the time. So this is another tomb from Han Dynasty, elaborately carved underground, and you can see this one is a stone, mostly stone construction. We have again a true vault. Here we have a barrel vault, and a semicircular slab was carved and filling the space underneath, bearing beautiful carving, showing a deer, and but somehow the body of the deer kind of was connected with all those patterns and creating a complicated two-dimensional surface. Abstract patterns for the lintel, and then the doors is covered with same combination of floral and animal motif, showing a dragon head and holding a doorknob. And one door is shown open as if it can turn and close. But in reality, both doors are solidly, planted on the ground, and they do not move, do not rotate at all. So it is mainly placed that way to suggest a living environment. So a consistent phenomena for these underground chamber is to create an environment as if they are just being used. They were just they were being operated, those doors, etc. So it gives you a kind of a suggestion about this space is alive. This space is alive, and it is those furnitures are being occupied, and those doors are being opened and closed, etc. So so basically the passage, some of them are half open because of the depiction of those doors. So the central passage is pretty straight, and arrangement of space is symmetrical. So we have those passage to the side chambers, but the central passage is the most elaborately decorated. So after the Han Dynasty, the nomads invaded China from the north, and then Buddhism start to be introduced in large scale to both the Yellow River and the Yangtze River area. And so this so-called Age of Disunion, during this period, the Yellow River and the Yangtze River were governed by different rulers. The Yellow River was primarily controlled by the non-Chinese speaking nomads who recently conquered North China, and the Yangtze River area, South China, were controlled by the Chinese. So there was a division between North and the South, and in general, the age of disunion is a period of frugal burial, the frugal burial period. Tombs are, significantly smaller compared to the Han Dynasty in terms of the earth mound created. So there are barely an earth mound for the age of disunion. A lot of the nomads, the rulers from the northern regimes, whose burials were using the tradition of those nomads, who basically, didn't leave any monumental structure, and who also kept their burial site a secret. So some of those rulers from the north didn't even left a tomb as a landmark. So the southern regime, in the southern regime, the earth mound were also significantly smaller. However, the above ground additional structures were expanded, and they also survived better. So for example, here I'm showing you those memorial columns from the Liang dynasty, which is one of the southern regimes with the capital city in Nanjing. And the Liang dynasty was the second last dynasty before the unification of by the Sui emperor. So here, for the tomb of Xiaojing, one of the emperors of the Liang dynasty, some really beautiful carving survived from the passage that lead to the tomb mound. And this is the first expression of a tradition that would continue in future dynasties. So using those paired structures and sculptures as well to frame a central passageway leading to the tomb. And here we have those a column and stele. So those all became very standardized element in Chinese funeral architecture. So they were placed symmetrically, framing a central passageway. And some of them had disappeared, but they were originally, made in pairs. So I wanted to, look at this column in some detail. This is quite a new thing for Chinese architecture. Nothing like this had been made before the age of disunion. It's, first it is a monolithic kind of stone piece. It's, one piece of large stone carved into this column. And secondly, the surface of the column is dressed with those lines, vertical lines. And these would be called fluting in Greek architecture. And it does look very much like those Greek Ionic column with fluting. Secondly, on top of the column, there's unmistakably some kind of capital structure. And above that, a disc carved with lotus petal, lotus flower motif, and on top of which there is a lion. While the lower body of the column suggests some kind of a Greek connection in architectural heritage, the structure above suggests those Indian and Persian connection. In the 3rd century BCE, the Mauryan king Ashoka created those so-called Ashoka column to spread Buddhism, and they basically use stone column as a medium for imperial edicts. So on the body of those columns, imperial edicts were carved to praise the tolerance and a great achievement of Buddha. And then on top of those columns, there's usually a combination of lotus flower with an animal figure. And those animal figure lion was one of the most important motif in the Ashoka column. So this is, if we are not so sure about the Greek association for the bottom part of the column, we are 100% sure that this part was inspired by the Ashoka column in India. And the Ashoka columns in India was probably influenced by Persian architecture from the Achaemenid dynasty, like those great columns from the Persepolis from the 6th century, 5th century BCE. So there is no question something like this constructed during the age of disunion China has an international connection to India, to Persia, and to Europe, right? And it is during the age of disunion associated with the introduction of Buddhism. This kind of mixture of culture as well as the kind of mixture of population when the nomads start to occupy the former Chinese land, and thus carried some of those foreign motif to the Chinese soil. So this is age of disunion is a period of mixture and blending. So here, as I said, the tomb mound was small, not monumental at all, but it is the sculptural carving framing the passageway that is most impressive. So here I'm showing you a few more. Huge animal figures representing the mythical animal of a winged lion. So if you look at this motif, the lion with wings, that is also a very popular motif in Persian art and Persian architecture, as well as Mesopotamian architecture, and were often decorated with those winged animal figure, winged lion, and winged bull. So the creation of this mythical animal also has a kind of international connection. Now, very quickly, the Tang Dynasty, when China was unified under a huge empire, those extravagant burial reinitiated. So tombs start to be monumental, and the Tang rulers also started the tradition of using a natural mountain as a burial mound. So those imperial mausoleum became known as Ling, which literally means mountain. But today it also is the synonym of imperial tomb. And that is because Tang emperors started using natural mountain as their burial mound. So they deliberately choose those very regular, geometrically regular natural mountain, and then dig a hill into it using as burial chamber, and then carefully hide the entrance, seal the passage. Because the mountain was so huge, so hopefully they were not broken into. They were still intact. Those whatever treasure buried into these chambers are still safe. So this is one of the Tang Emperor's tomb called Qianling. And Qianling was for the third Tang Emperor, Emperor Gaozong. And you can see that mountain, very regular in shape. And it was the burial for the emperor. That natural hill was enclosed by wall, and those walls are gated, marking the cardinal direction. And then a passage was created in the southern direction. And then, human figure and animal figure carved in stone lined the two sides of that passage, approaching the main south gate, right? And then the site was carefully chosen so that it has a central geometric protruding hill resembling a pyramidal or conical shape. And then to its due south, there are two additional smaller hills that represent the Que, the gate tower from the Han Dynasty, and probably before, often with sloping roofs on top as well, framing a central gate, marking the passage into sacred realm. And here, those Que were also represented by natural mountain, natural hills, right? So for the construction of Tang tomb, it's not easy at all. So you need to find these characteristics in the natural topography. And so these are pretty rare. And once these elements were identified, then a huge area is enclosed by wall. So here it's an example of architecture that combined natural element with human construction, and creating those funeral complex like this, and lining the central passageway leading to the tomb are those stone carving, the military officers on the left side, that is on the west side, and the civil officers on the east side, lining that. And approaching, so here we have the gate, the rammed earth base for the gate of the wall enclosing that mountain. So again, those imperial tombs are not opened, are not excavated, but from Tang Dynasty, but the regional level tombs were opened. For example, this one belonged to a prince, Li Zhongrun, and he was, he didn't had a chance to become an emperor. He was executed by his own mother, Empress Wu. We talk about that, famous and the only female emperor in the entire Chinese history who reached that top position with great talent and capability, but also cruelty. So he killed whoever challenged her position, including her own son. So Li Chongrun was one of those, killed by Empress Wu. So he was posthumously restored to that status as the crown prince after he died. After Empress Wu also lost power, and then a tomb was constructed to honor him. So this tomb was opened. It has a truncated pyramid above ground. So this is a princely tomb. So it's not appropriate to select a mountain for the burial. So a human construction was completed. So that central tomb structure was surrounded by a square walls that has both the corner tower as well as central gate towers. So the tomb chamber was under the truncated pyramid, and the passage toward that underground chamber was through a slope and gradually descending to the level of the tomb chamber. And the tomb chamber was symmetrical with the central passage and the symmetrical side chambers. So that's basically the very typical structure for a tomb since the Tang Dynasty. So the passage was framed again by fantastic animal. And in this case, it's a tiger and a dragon. A tiger on the west side and a dragon on the east side. And they, of course, represent the direction, because the symbolic animal of the east is the blue dragon, and the symbolic animal of the west is the white tiger. Which such a convention started long before the Tang Dynasty. So something from 3000 BCE in the prehistoric tomb, we already saw the creation of a tiger using seashells, and the creation of a tiger. And so here we have a dragon and a tiger using seashell to make the pattern. And those seashells were used as money, as currency in those prehistoric societies. And the interior of the tomb for Tang Dynasty princes also was trying to create a life atmosphere. So the wall were painted as if you can see through those wooden structure, as if those were gardens beyond the limit of that tomb chamber. So the walls are painted as if they are structures of an open pavilion, and then the murals painted on the wall suggest a space behind, beyond that, those columns. And those paintings suggest timber construction, so suggest columns, brackets, and beams, right? And those wall painting often features garden scene and showing very specific moment in life. And there you can see that lady was entertained by a bird, which just fly, leaving that tree. And so it's very specific. It was just like the open the door in the Han Dynasty tomb. They were meant to suggest life in these dark and lifeless underground chambers. So very quickly, after Tang Dynasty, China was split again. So when China was in disunion, it entered a period of frugal burial. When China was unified, usually the mausoleum for the rulers were extravagant and grand. So 5 dynasties, here we are looking at some rulers' tombs. So on the left is the tomb for Wang Jian, who was a local ruler in today's Sichuan province. And again, pure masonry structure using arches and those vault. And here they are corbelled vault, right? Corbelled vault, not true vault. But here we have a true arch and a central passageway for the tomb chamber and symmetrical side chambers. And those, wooden construction details carved in those stone. So these are all standard features for Chinese tomb. So on the right is Li Bian's tomb from the southern Tang, which is also a regional regime in today's Jiangsu and Jiangsu, Zhejiang province in the south. So true arch, and you can see here as well, brackets suggesting wooden construction. This is, one from the north, a tomb chamber with wall paintings and architectural details suggesting timber construction. And this is at the end of the underground chamber. So Northern Song tombs, Northern Song imperial tombs. Northern Song, which didn't have the large territory as the previous Tang and Han dynasty, their tombs are also significantly smaller. So they still have the kind of a pyramid mound, kind of surrounded by walls that are gated. And then the south gate is preceded by animal and human stone figures. So these really became a convention. And eventually, the following Ming and the Qing dynasty would continue such a fashion for imperial mausoleum. So here again, those wonderful, excellent stone carvings survived, and the tomb was not opened yet. So here we have, this is basically the central passage, and lining on the side, stone elephants, stone lines and stone horses and winged mythical creatures, and then human figures, usually military on the west and civil on the east. So and all these tombs share the same orientation, that started from the very beginning, from prehistoric period. We start to observe Chinese tombs are usually oriented precisely kind of north-south, and this is always the case. So you always find that north-south orientation. The major passageway leading to the main gate is always in the south, right? And those animals and human carvings are always attached to the south of that tomb complex. And this is the case for all these examples we are looking, which is quite consistent and quite amazing a phenomena. So here showing a more complete view of this Northern Song tomb, a small kind of a truncated pyramid, and those animal figures lining the southern path leading to the tomb. The imperial tomb is not opened, but many local tombs were opened. So this is the Song Dynasty, Northern Song Dynasty tomb chamber from Xi'an. And I wanted just to point out a few things that I have been repeating many times already, but here it is carried out in greater kind of architectural virtuoso, and life atmosphere created by this little scene. The door it's half open because we see there is someone peeking out, as if she was just in between the door, coming out from a space behind that door. In reality, there's nothing, no space behind that door at all. But the purpose is to create that kind of specific moment in life. And same is true. So there on that wall, it seems like a balcony, and there are some figures standing there and looking out from those windows, suggesting there is a space behind those cold and solid walls. Then timber construction details. So these are all masonry, bricks and stones, but those details suggest a post and lintel and also brackets, right? So those brackets really are given a lot of attention, similar attention given to the brackets as what we have seen in the book 营造法式. This is a sample of a Liao dynasty tomb. Liao was the northern regime founded by the Khitan people, and they controlled the Mongolian region and as well as North China from the 10th century to the 12th century. And their underground tombs suggest both similarity and a difference to the contemporary Tang and Song dynasty. And for example, their ceiling were decorated kind of like a tent, interior of a domed structure, like the interior of a yurt. That is kind of suggesting some nomadic features. But the walls are painted, under the central dome, walls are painted like those Tang tombs, suggesting landscape beyond the limit of the wall tomb chamber of the tomb chamber. And then along the passage, human figures were painted with the civil officers on the right, which is the east, and then military officers painted on the left, which is the west side of the passage, because that passage is always from the south to north, right? Always from south to north in the tomb case. And some ceilings were painted with images that unmistakably suggest communication with the cultures way beyond East Asia. So here, lotus flower suggests some Buddhist connection. And then surrounding that, we have the zodiac, and those zodiac were Western European zodiac, all right? So these are not the Chinese zodiac. These are Western zodiac. So you should be able to see some of those, like the scorpion here, right? So in the Chinese zodiac, there's no scorpion. So these are Western zodiac symbols and painted on in the ceiling of a Liao dynasty tomb. So the vast priory, Mongolian priory and Siberian region must be kind of a melting pot for different culture to meet in the ancient time because of the nomadic nature of the lifestyle sustained by that huge land. So this is a tomb from the Jin dynasty. We know the Jin dynasty also occupied North China. It succeeded the Liao dynasty. So Jin culture was more influenced by the Song culture. So this one from Shanxi province, this is the tomb chamber, wooden detail, those stone carving, but representing wooden detail. And surrounding carvings suggest some kind of space beyond the tomb chamber. And here a similar peaking motif, someone, just stepping out of the wall and looking out. Balcony carved with those details suggesting a latticed doors and really fantastic depiction of the brackets there. So show you some mausoleum tomb from the another regime that we didn't look very much, which is a contemporary to the Song, Liao, and the Jin Empire from the 11th century to the 13th century. That is the Xixia. This is a regime located in northwestern part of China. And their rulers were semi-Tibetan. So gradually, we will get into the Tibetan section. And they were known as Tangut people. Tangut people was a branch of the Tibetan people, but they were split from the Tibetans very early, and they occupied the northwestern part of China in today's Ningxia province and Gansu province in that area, the so-called Hexi corridor in that area. And their architecture suggests those kind of the Buddhist culture of the Xixia society. So this is their tomb, and their tomb were constructed in the form almost like a Buddhist pagoda, and with rammed earth center. But originally there were timber structure surrounding all of them, surrounding all those levels, and with a top structure as well. So there were holes in this rammed earth platform, suggesting the insertion of beam, and there were holes on the ground suggesting columns. So originally these were basically, from outside it looks like a roofed structure. And this is the same fashion they construct pagoda for their religious worship. And the technology remind us those high platform 台榭 construction from the Zhou dynasty, where rammed earth core was combined with timber structure, right? Now, finally, we reached the Ming dynasty, and Ming dynasty, the most completely preserved mausoleum structure was from the Ming and the Qing dynasty, the last two imperial dynasties. And this is the tomb of Xiaoling for the founder of the Ming dynasty in the city of Nanjing, right? So this, monumental mausoleum, the tomb structure itself did not survive very well, but the passage leading to the tomb, had created these great animal figures of camels, elephants, horses, and winged lions, etc., survived very well. And this is the model for all the Ming and the Qing dynasty mausoleums, which we will focus mostly on the those 13 tombs from Beijing. So the Ming dynasty, the capital city was relocated from Nanjing to Beijing, and starting with the third Emperor Chengzu of Ming. So there, in the northern northern mountain area of Beijing, a place was selected to accommodate all imperial mausoleum. In total, for more than 200 years, a total of 13 Ming dynasty emperors were buried there. So they share the same general passage called the spirit route. And at some point, they branch out into separate spirit path. So these, the passage in a funeral architecture leading to the tomb is called a spirit path. These were the passage, for ceremonial procession, ritual procession, carrying sacrifice to the tomb. All right. So there's a general spirit path for all the 13 tombs, but then they branch out into those separate spirit path, and sometimes there are further branches. And here, there is kind of a more complicated. You might also reach it that way. So it's like a tree. The spirit path, which is like the vein that carry blood to each of those cells of those tombs. So in total, there are 13 of them. The earliest and the largest was for the third emperor of Ming, the founder of Beijing as the Ming capital. and that is that one. That is called the Changling, the Chang Mausoleum. And then after Chengzu, Emperor Chengzu's tomb, so his successors, built their own tomb in that location. Right. So let's take a look. This marked the beginning of the spirit path, the general spirit path. A really fantastic stone archway known as a paifang, and it is a paifang or pailo memorial archway of the highest rank. It has 5 bays, and it has 11 roofs. So this is a 5 bay, 11 roofed paifang or pailo. And the whole structure was built with stone, and the stone was combined in the post and lintel timber fashion. And so that stone paifang is located here. So marking the beginning of that spiritual path. The next is a gate, right? And that gate located here. After that, there's another gate, and then there's a steely pavilion, where you have a huge stele with inscriptions talking about the founding of this site as an imperial tomb. So that's the stele pavilion there. And after that, the spirit path was framed by those paired structures. First, a pair of columns, and a pair of columns there, and marking the beginning of those animal sculptures, those sculptural kind of passageway. The passage framed by sculptures of both animal and human figure, actually. So that is that section. Spirit path, and here, pretty much like Nanjing, the Xiaoling tomb. Here we have a pair of kneeling camel, a pair of standing camel, a pair of kneeling elephant, a pair of standing elephant, and etc. and etc. They all appear in pair, and a very long passage. And after those animal figures, the passage was framed by kind of a human figure, but here, instead of having civil and military officers lining on 2 sides, they are lining different sections. So first we have this military ones, and on both sides we have this military figures, and then after that we have the civil figures. So they were lined in different sections rather than on the 2 different sides. So you can see these are military, both military figure, but though that is a civil officer wearing those long robes instead of armors. After that, another gate, right? So that gate is marking the end of the sculpture framed road. So branching out to those separate tombs. So here we are looking at the largest of that one. So we are just going to look at one of those tombs, the Changling, belonging to the founder of this tomb site. So this tomb, the Ming Dynasty tomb, the tomb mound, are no longer truncated pyramid. Rather, they became kind of domical. They became semi, a half, you know, a semi kind of a circular formation, and it was enclosed by wall, right? So this earth mound, domical earth mound, hemispherical. That is the word I'm looking for. Hemispherical earth mound was surrounded by wall, and that wall connected to the courtyard wall for those for those halls, and they featured gate again. So there are a lot of gate. You know, there are gate along the way, and then there are gate for each of those courtyard for each tomb. So one gate, second gate, and then here we have the sacrificial hall. And beyond that, another gate, and finally the altar for making sacrifice. And then the tomb mound itself was constructed like a city. It was enclosed by wall, and that wall continued inside the courtyard wall. And then marking the south is a gate tower that looks as if what is beyond that gate is a city. So again, the tomb was constructed to resemble a city for life. And then in front of it, we have those kind of axial space for making sacrifice, right? So that's what it looked from the air. First gate, second gate, the sacrificial hall. Beyond that, that is the earth mound, and that is the gate tower, suggesting behind it is a city. And so let's take a look at those structures from the ground. This is the first gate, right? There. Second gate. There. And after that, from the second gate, looking at the sacrificial hall. This is the second largest wooden structure in ancient China, second only to the Hall of Supreme Harmony in the Forbidden City. And its interior, using primarily coat color of blue and green, and using those unpainted column, and which created a solemn interior atmosphere that is quite different from the Forbidden City. And originally they were also pretty empty, with a symbolic altar suggesting the throne, but used to making interior offering. And today it is used as a kind of exhibition hall. But originally it's just as empty as the Hall of Supreme Harmony in the Forbidden City, and to highlight the singular status of the Son of Heaven. And beyond that, another symbolic gate. And beyond that gate is the stone altar for offering. And yeah, so that's the stone altar for offering. And looking beyond is the wall surrounding the earth mound, and with a tower suggesting a gate of a city. Right? So the Changling was not excavated, but one of the Ming tomb from the 13 tombs, one of the 13 tombs were excavated. That is the Dingling. All right, Dingling was excavated. The reason is, it collapsed and it was exposed, accidentally. So archaeologists had to make rescue excavation. So this one, we know exactly what is the underground chamber is. So like Changling, it also has, gate, sacrificial hall, gate tower, circular hemispherical earth mound. And the tomb chamber, underground tomb chamber, was planned to continue the axiality of the above ground structure, right? So it's located precisely in the center, along the central axis, slightly behind the center of the circle, of the circular plan. Central chambers suggesting different layers of courtyards. There are gates in between, and symmetrical side chambers, and then there's a back chamber, right? And they were all these chambers were, barrel vaulted in the roof. So the interior, and looking from the central passageway, looking at the back, and stone carving suggesting wooden construction in the fashion of the Forbidden City, showing sloping roofs. And side chambers with those, accompanying treasures, including those porcelains, and the majority of them were removed to be exhibited in the sacrificial hall. So here, these are only part of those treasures originally discovered from here, right? So a lot of the artifacts discovered here were removed to be exhibited in the Changling tomb, which is not very far away. And some of the more fragile ones were removed to be preserved in the Palace Museum in Forbidden City, in those underground preservation chambers for better condition of humidity and air composition. So you can see here those barrel vault, right? And the Qing Dynasty, I'm going to look at it very quickly, because the Qing Dynasty tombs are really no more than some continuation from the Ming Dynasty imperial tomb construction. So the Qing Dynasty had 3 imperial burial sites. The Ming Dynasty had 2. One is in Nanjing. In Nanjing there are 2 tombs. And in Beijing, there are 13 tombs. So in total, there are 15 emperors from the Ming Dynasty who were buried properly. And the Qing Dynasty, there are 3 burial sites. One is in Shenyang, in Manchuria. These were the tombs before they conquered entire China. But back then, they were already mimicking the Ming imperial tombs, featuring those courtyards and courtyard gate, sacrificial hall, and a gate tower, and circular mound, and enclosing of those, everything within walls, and suggesting some kind of city. And here the feng shui idea was incorporated, a screening hill created behind it, protecting and giving good feng shui to the site. So here from the air, memorial archway marking the entrance to the sacred path. So the gate, steely pavilion, and behind it, sacrificial hall, and behind it is the tower for the earth mound, right? So this is the, the steely, the memorial archway, memorial archway, and behind it the gate, behind it the steely pavilion, and a paired monument framing the central axis, and behind it is the gate tower, and the gate tower. This is a sacrificial hall in front of the gate tower. Right? And a detail of that gate tower from a different angle. Now, around Beijing, when the Qing rulers conquered China, they chose two sites, near Beijing, a western side and an eastern side, and they alternate the location regularly. So basically, the grandfather and grandson were buried on the same site. So that's basically the father and son were not buried on the same site. So they alternate the site. So I'm just going to show you these pictures because really they resemble those Ming Ming imperial mausoleums. Their scales are smaller, and to me, the artistic quality of the carvings were inferior to the Ming dynasty. So this is the spirit path, and these are the stone animal, and the camel. They look kind of skinny, not as powerful as those Ming dynasty ones. Paired columns leading to a memorial archway, and behind that we have gates and halls, etc. So this is from Dongling, the eastern mausoleum, spirit path. So here basically on each side there were many tombs, and for each tomb it has its own spirit path, gate, sacrificial hall, and a burial mound. So one thing I wanted to mention is for these imperial tombs, the feng shui is a very important element. They try to find the ideal site that provide the most auspicious qi, and such a crucial choice is considered as significant not only for the emperor himself who were buried there, but also for the fortune of the entire dynasty. So if you made a mistake in choosing a site to bury an emperor, then the whole fate of the dynasty might be kind of doomed. So they all have this kind of, on the side, you do feel that good feng shui, because you always have that nice mountain range in the horizon, giving the site a sense of protection. And you always find those perfect symmetry, perfect scenery, framing, providing background for these imperial tomb architecture. And it does make a difference. If not for the fate of the dynasty, at least for the visual effect, it is very carefully chosen and carefully balanced to create those kind of beautiful pictures, framing architecture. So you can get a sense of that, the good feng shui, protected by those mighty mountain range and open to the fertile land, often with water and meandering rivers. So this is only one site at the Dongling site. This is just one complex. And in other valleys, there are, tombs for other emperors. So, so here we have the complex, which is unusual here. These were not for emperor, but for empress. These were constructed in the early 20th century and the late 19th century for Empress Dowager Cixi, who basically ruled China for 40 years, from 1862 to kind of 1902. During those 40 years, Empress Dowager was the true ruler of China, and she was buried, in the fashion of a male emperor here. So this is looking from the back of this double tomb of Empress Dowager Cixi and Empress Dowager Cian, who passed away many decades earlier than Cixi, but they were buried, side by side here. And the earth mound was significantly smaller compared to the Ming Dynasty, right? And architectural element was more emphasized. This is the interior of the sacrificial hall for Empress Dowager Cixi, using a lot of gold. So she was also the ruler who was the last imperial constructor for the summer palace Yiheyuan, and she was also the one who built that stone boat in Yiheyuan that we looked at last time. And she became kind of notorious because of her extravagant spending of all those imperial revenue on her own tomb and on her garden. And she was also sometimes blamed as not giving sufficient fund to the army. And she was blamed for the defeat of China by the Japanese fleet during the First Sino-Japanese War on the sea. And her tomb does look very luxurious. So there are a lot of gold used there, a lot of money spent there. But I think all those military defeat cannot be blamed totally just to one ruler. It is the general historical path that an individual figure might or might not have a that much influence on that direction. So finally, give you some picture of those underground chamber. There's one tomb that was opened as well. And that is the tomb for the 18th century Qing dynasty ruler, Qianlong Emperor. So his tomb was opened. So one of those Ming tombs, and one of those Qing tombs were opened. So this is the underground chamber. Nothing that surprising, nothing special, because we have seen all those tombs before from those long past burial vault. But here, a unique thing is the Tibetan Buddhist motif carved in the tomb, because the Manchu rulers were Tibetan Buddhists, right? This is the archway, and show you some other tombs from the Western tomb. So this one belonged to Emperor Jiaqing, who was a late 18th century, early 19th century ruler of Qing dynasty. So basically gate, sacrificial hall, gate tower, and the tomb mound is a hemispherical mound behind it.